visiting, I will again say my name is not Daniel. And we're looking forward to having Daniel come. If you see me do this, that's because Tom back there is yelling at me to get the microphone up. It keeps slipping, so we'll do the best we can. Last week, we talked about surrender. And surrender is so important because you see, without surrendering my life to Christ, both in a salvation mode, if you will, and in a daily mode, without doing that, where am I going? On the other hand, though, you might be saying, how am I ever going to do that? I'm human. You know, I have that problem. I'm human. Boy, I wish I wasn't human, because if I wasn't human, man, the things I could do. But here we are. We're human. So I thought today, last week we talked about surrender. Today we're going to talk about grace and how God gives us the grace to walk the journey that He sets before us. Because you see, it really is His journey that He's given us to walk. I don't pick the journey. He does. Let me ask you something. This is just free. It comes extra. How many of us here this morning would say that we have done exactly what we thought we would do in life when we were 18? Are you exactly where you thought you'd be when you were 18? Now, for some of us, 18 hasn't come yet. Yeah. For most of this room, 18 was at least a couple of years ago. And we laugh at that because we know the way we make God laugh is go home and tell Him our 5-year plan. And He's like, sure, you let me know how that works. So you see, it's really God's journey, not mine. It's God's journey. And He says right here in Isaiah chapter 40, to whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? What a rhetorical question that is. He says no one, really. No one. And here's something I want you to pick up on that isn't really part of the discussion this morning. If we were to look at verse 26 in the middle, he says, talking about the stars, he says, He brings them out like an army, one after another, and here's what I want us to hear, calling each by name. Did you know that God named every star in the sky? And then we say, does He really care about me? Oh, come on. If He named every star in the sky, of course He cares about us. So here we want to talk about grace this morning. But what is grace? What is grace? Now, I know we could be really cool and come out with the acrostic. How many of you know the acrostic for grace? Okay, all 4 of us. Great. The acrostic for grace is GRACE, God's riches at Christ's expense. Remember that. God's riches at Christ's expense, because that's what grace is, but it's more than that. It's more than the results of grace, which is peace and blessings. It's more than its results. It's more than its definition, which is the free and unmerited favor of God as manifested in the salvation of sinners and the bestowal of blessings. Doesn't that sound cool? That's R.C. Sproul right down the middle. I believe grace is more than this. I believe grace is the leeway that God gives us to make a mistake and recover. That's grace. Let me tell you that again. I believe that it is the leeway God grants each of us to make a mistake and recover so we can learn from our mistakes, and which allows us to grow up and mature as believers. Because you see, we can be an inch deep and a mile wide, or we can be very deep and go deeper with Jesus and understand what He's really asking of us. So besides what is grace, grace is manifested in many ways, isn't it? Psalms tells us that God's grace is renewed every single morning, and thank goodness for that, isn't it? Thank goodness for that. Because there are many days, and people say, well, you don't really do this. I absolutely do. I get up in the morning, and there are many days in my prayer, I say, God, help me to not do something stupid today. Really. Because it's so easy to do, isn't it? It's so easy to do something stupid. Say an unkind word. Show an unkind feeling. Just ignore people or do something that I shouldn't have done. It's so easy because we are human. But besides what is grace, it's manifested in many ways. Yes, the blessings. But also, have you ever thought of God's grace as coming to you in the form of tests? Oh no, that got quick and silent, didn't it? We don't think of God's grace coming to us in the form of tests because we don't like tests. I left school a long time ago. I don't want any more tests. And God says, yeah, no, you got to have a few because you've got to grow up. But the tough times, it is in the tough times that we learn that God is never tired. God never tires of us coming to Him. In the tough times, we learn that God never complains that we woke Him up. That God never says, leave a message and I'll call you back. He's always simply available. For the weak and the weary, when we are at the end of our rope, God is available. When our hope is gone, God tells us it's not quite over yet. God promises here in these verses that at every speed in our spiritual life, His grace will be sufficient. And I use that word specifically because we're going to look at 3 wonders that await us if we place our lives in the middle of God's grace. No matter how we might feel, His grace is always there. 3 speeds, if you will, to the journey we are on. And here's the interesting part. What you're going to find is, and I've called them speeds because one is real fast, one's kind of in the middle, and one's slow. And you will find that all 3 of these will be evident multiple times during your life. Multiple times. This isn't like, you go from one to the next to the next. No. They'll happen over and over and over again. All 3 will be there. So what's the first one? In verse 31, he said, but those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. And I like this because this is the New Living Translation. And I like this for this reason. He says they will find new strength. Some of the older versions say will renew their strength. It's okay. That's fine. That's God's word. But I kind of like find new strength because you see, my strength is not enough. So you can renew my strength over and over and over and over again, and it won't be enough. I need new strength. I need God's strength. I need the power of Jesus Christ in me to make this happen. But then he says this, they will soar high on wings like eagles. This is the first one. Soaring like an eagle. When you're up in an airplane and you look down, that gives you a bird perspective. Imagine being an eagle and doing that every single day. Wouldn't that be cool? Soaring like on wings like eagles, way up high. The grand perspective. Boy, I get to see so much. But it's going by so fast. And while it seems that this would be the greatest of all speeds, it's not where we live as believers. I want you to think of the contrasts on our spiritual journey. Think of these contrasts. You ever had a high and great experience as a believer? If you haven't, I feel bad for you. A high and great experience. Boy, you came home and it was just, that was great. Maybe it was a concert, maybe it was a retreat, maybe it was something else. You ever had a low experience? And you said, God, I don't know how I'm going to make this. I don't know how I'm going to survive this. How am I ever going to do this? Those low experiences. We have highs, we have lows. We have exciting times and ordinary days. Let's use the disciples as an example. Right after the crucifixion, do you suppose that was one of their high points in their spiritual lives? Probably not. Nope. Definitely not. Definitely not soaring like an eagle. That's for sure. Think of this. They had invested their lives in this guy for 3 years. They were expecting him to beat up those nasty Romans and establish his kingdom, and woohoo, baby, we're on. And he died. And then he left. He appeared to them, but now he's gone. Wow, that's got to be a low point. A low point. I would think probably the lowest of lows. And that's where God left him, right? No. Because I want you to think about this. The Gospel of John comes to an end. Acts chapter 1 says Jesus left. But then comes what? Acts chapter 2. Oh man, there's a difference. In verse 2 of Acts chapter 2, there were violent winds and noise. In verse 3, there were tongues of fire. I want you to look up. Look up right now. Look up. You can do it. You don't have to look at me. Look up. What do you see? You see rafters. Imagine seeing tongues of fire coming down on top of you. Would that create a little bit of excitement and a little bit of, anxiety and nervousness and excitement and all that? Tongues of fire. Verse 6, a crowd comes together. Peter, from verses 14 through 36, see, he was long-winded too. Peter preaches. And in verse 41, 3,000 people named the name of Jesus Christ. That's soaring like an eagle. That's soaring like an eagle. We find also in Philippians chapter 3, starting in verse 12, yet, my brothers, I do not consider myself to have arrived spiritually, nor do I consider myself already perfect. But I keep going on, grasping ever more firmly that purpose for which Christ grasped me. My brothers, I do not consider myself to have fully grasped it even now, but I do concentrate on this. I leave the past behind. There's a key. I leave the past behind, and with hands outstretched to whatever lies ahead, I go straight for the goal. My reward, the honor of being called by God in Christ. This is the transformation of Paul into a dynamic missionary. You ever watch those shows on HGTV? Those renovation shows? I do. I'll admit, I like them. I have nothing to renovate, but I still like to watch them. That's renovation. That's remodeling. I don't want remodeling. I want transformation. That's what I want. The only thing recognizable about Paul was the outside. That was it. They recognized him, but everything else was different. You see, that's transformation. With hands outstretched to whatever lies ahead. Paul was ready to soar at any moment. And there are many other instances of this in our own lives. These mountaintop experiences are a result of God's grace. You go to a men's retreat or a ladies' retreat. You have something happen, a concert or an event that you go to, and it's just uplifting, and the experience is fantastic. And it's an encouragement. I believe that God allows this into our lives as an encouragement to keep us going. A reminder that as we place our lives in the middle of God's grace, there will be times that He lets us soar like an eagle. Isn't that fantastic? Well, there's a second way that we move through our spiritual life. Going back to verse 31, it not only says we soar on high or high on wings like eagles, It says they will run and not grow weary. Boy, I wish that was true. I wish that was true. So does Pat right now. You know, even when I was a kid, I played sports in high school. I played basketball. I ran track. You know what I hated most of all? Every single sport we had to run. And I had those devious, maniacal coaches that would take us in this gym, and if you've ever watched these drills, you go from the end line to the foul line and back, to the half court and back, to the other foul and back, to the full length and back. What you end up doing is in that one drill, you run the entire length of this basketball court 2.5 times. And then they would make us do it 10, 12, 15, 18 times. I hated it. I am not a runner. You could probably figure that out now. But here he says you're going to run, but you're not going to grow weary. You're going to run and not grow weary. 1 Corinthians 9, starting in verse 24, says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize?" Sorry, participation prizes are out. "Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize." The metaphor is running, probably Paul's best example. And he links running a race to what it is like to live the Christian life. Now, running is not as spectacular as soaring, is it? You think about, gee, if I had the choice of running or flying as a superpower, I'd take flying. Of course I would. Running is not as spectacular, but even eagles cannot soar every day, all day. They got to come to the ground once in a while. Running is still moving forward, though, at a quickened pace. And Paul's analogy has some points we should note. First of all, running takes endurance. As we saw in Philippians 3, he was pressing on. He was pressing on. But if we look back and running to win, he said in Corinthians, running to win takes what? It takes direction. Now, if you said the first one to get to the far side of this gym and back wins, and I started running this way, do you think I'm going to win? No, because the guy who runs straight and back has the better chance of winning. And that's what Paul said. I do not run. Look at that verse. I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I don't just wander around. I have a journey. And by God's grace, He has given me that journey to walk and to run and to soar. And right now, I'm running. But I run with a purpose. And it requires planning and strategy and effort. Running to the end takes self-discipline. He says, I bring my body under control. And we know that's so easy, right? We know bringing our body under control. No, it's not easy sometimes. We want to do things that probably aren't in our best interest. All of this is possible, though, only through the grace God gives us to complete our course. Running without getting tired takes practice. Just like soaring, we need to be looking for opportunities to run. Opportunities to take the lead and run with an idea. You know, it is a wonder and a gift when God gives us those opportunities to run. And it is only by His grace. that we are sustained and able to do it. Well, we can soar and we can run, but there is a third part of our spiritual journey that will probably take up most of our time. The days we soar and the days we run will probably not be as many as the days we walk. He says, they will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. I want you to think about this. Walking is probably not as exciting as soaring or running. If you could see somebody flying, that would be impressive, wouldn't it? You watch somebody running up and down the road every day. We have people in our neighborhood that run every day. Why? I do not know. But they run every day. I'm impressed. I'm not going to join them, but I'm impressed. Walking simply does not have the excitement factor, does it? And I know it depends on where you're walking. If you're walking out in the desert, you see the mountains. You know, I grew up in New England, Maine specifically, and I grew up very near Acadia National Park, which is right on the ocean, Bar Harbor, as we say, Bahaba. And it was great. There was a beautiful beach there, and if you're looking out into the ocean off to the right, was these cliffs. They were probably at least 100 feet tall. And along the cliff, about 30, 40 feet down, there was this walkway. Sometimes it was only about 6 or 8 inches wide, and sometimes it was maybe a foot and a half. Being the smart kids that we were, we used to hike the cliff. Not telling my mother, of course. But it was exciting. Man, I thought, as I looked out over the ocean, Europe must be the next thing. It was beautiful. It was a great walk. So I suppose it depends on where you walk. The surroundings can be exciting. But few of us would say, hey, let's go out for an exciting walk. We just wouldn't. Yet, I'm not a medical person, but I read statistics that tell us that one of the best low-impact exercises is walking. Just get out and walk. Many good things. It improves your mood, probably because you're so tired by the time you get back, you just don't care. It is rebuilding because it uses muscles in a natural way, not in an unnatural way. And you know what? It is the same in our spiritual lives as well. Not many days will be soaring. They're exhausting, like coming back from those camps and retreats. Haven't you had a fantastic time and you get home and you do what? Let's go again. No, you go, I'm glad to be home. Because it was exciting, but it was exhausting. We couldn't live a constant spiritual life like that for a couple of reasons. First, we just wear ourselves out. And second, I don't think we learn as much as we experience. And there's nothing wrong with the experience, but we don't learn. We have to come home and take that experience and learn from it. And how do we do that? We walk. We do have more days running probably than soaring, but like a marathon, not many of us could run a marathon every day for the rest of our lives, could we? But running is vital. We get a lot of God things done when we're running. But what about those times when I'm neither soaring nor running? Isaiah tells us there will be days when we simply walk. Adam did what? He ran with God. He soared. No, he walked with God in the garden. Adam walked with God. Abraham walked with the Lord as they spoke about Lot. Jesus did what? He walked with his disciples. In 1 John 2, it says this, whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. John tells us that to be truly a disciple, we must learn to walk as Jesus walked. Let me tell you something. Walking is daily. I don't know any of us that live a day in our life that we don't walk. I'm walking right now. I walked out of the house, got onto my golf cart, drove up here, walked into the building. Walking is daily. You cannot get from point A to point B without walking. You could run, I suppose, but most of us will walk because walking is daily. Walking is plain. Walking is, most importantly, consistent. We consistently walk. And did you know you have a certain way of walking? I know people that I could see across a room, and just by the way they're walking, I know who they are. Why? Because we all have a certain way in which we walk. Walking spiritually is as important as soaring or running. You know why? Number one, it gives us time to reflect. As you're out walking, what do you see? Oh, Bob, I see the desert, I see the sidewalk, I see the buildings, I see the house. Oh, look, that house is for sale. Oh, look, that one's sold. Oh, look at that car, look at that truck, look at that animal. Walking, I get to reflect. I get to see things that I don't normally see. It gives us time to absorb because I'm not thinking about having to keep my pace or to soar. I'm walking, and so I get to think and absorb what I've experienced. It gives me time to apply. Oh, how am I going to apply what I've learned to my life to help myself and others? It gives us time to pray. When I'm running, I'm not praying because I want to keep concentrated that I don't fall down. But when I'm walking, I get to pray. God's grace is right there too. He provides times of rest and healing when he didn't have to. He didn't have to do that. He is there also walking with us. And here's the fun part. He walks with us at our pace. He doesn't say, come on, keep up, come on. You're falling behind. No, he says, I'm walking with you. You go ahead and walk, and I'll just walk with you. Isn't that neat? He's walking at our pace, and we then need to learn to walk the walk, keeping on a right path and keeping to Christ's example. God's grace is available no matter what speed we're going. On days when we soar, it is the breath of God that keeps us afloat. On days that we run, it is the grace of God that gives us the endurance to make it to the end of our race. And when we walk, it is the grace of God that keeps our lives and testimonies consistent so that others see that even every single day, whether it's a big decision or a little one, God is in the middle of it. So whatever speed we're going in our spiritual journey, let's remember it is the grace of God that allows us some leeway to figure out the course that he has laid before us. And since he's given us that grace, I encourage us to extend that grace to each other so that we can grow together as a body. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your love and your concern. Thank you for the way you have set before us your time. Father, we just pray that you would help us to extend the grace that has been extended to us. And we'll praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Take your communion cup, if you will. Bible says that in the same night in which he was betrayed, he took bread. If you do not have one of the element cups, please Go ahead. They're on the back table. If you'd like to get one, feel free to go ahead. But he took bread and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." Let's open the bottom part where the bread is. And together, let us take the bread. He said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Take, eat in remembrance of me." It says then he took a cup and he put some wine in it. If you'll open the top part, he said, "This is my blood, which is poured out for you, for the forgiveness of sins." What a wonderful thing that is. Let us always be grateful. Let us always remember the sacrifice that he made. Let's drink together. Father, we thank you that your Son gave his life that we might have life abundantly. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.